reciprocated, package hostility as love. Panic when own needs surface and collide with the needs of others. It's kind of sad, isn't it, that we can't just have room for our own needs. Overextends physically, financially, emotionally. They somaticize pain. So then a lot of aches and pains because they're not just expressing what's going on. May expect certain phrases, actions that signify reciprocity of love. So they are looking for you to say those, nice little catchphrases back to them. Like, thank you, you're wonderful, And then of course they're like, oh no, it's nothing. Okay. Everybody with me? Haven't lost anybody? Okay, so now we're going to take a look at the wings, the two with the one wing and the three wings. So is everybody again clear on the wings? It's always the two numbers, one to the left, the one to the right. Okay, so this is a two with a one wing, and that one wing sort of moderates or influences their two-ness. Takes pride in being of service to others, can be hard on themselves. So we're picking up some of the one qualities of being hard on yourself. Approaches service from a moral principle or perspective. So they can be these sort of self-righteous about doing good because it's for a principle, for a cause. Or they can be into attention to correct protocol. Emotional awareness of own needs, but difficulty in accepting, expressing. So we know that the one also has difficulty just being okay with their needs. They have this need to control their feelings. Feelings, not needs. Both, I guess, but particularly feelings. The one, it's almost like the one has this metal plate going across about right here, and whatever is below that is just like boiling and gurgling and like a volcano, and it's very hard for them to just let that come up. They will try to keep it buried there and keep it down. So the two starts to pick up even more of that uncomfortableness about feelings. They can be more, so twos are pretty extroverted. Like they're the ones that are kind of flitting around, at the party, talking, getting to know people. So if they have a stronger one wing, then they tend to be more introverted and not as bubbly. So there's a little bit more serious quality to them. But they do have that warm feeling of the two. And they can be driven by a more altruistic purpose. They're also more self-critical than the two with a three wing, and can act the martyr and be overly caretaking. So again, as you know, the one is the perfectionistic who wants to do everything perfectly in the right way. So if a two is trying to take care of everybody, and if they have a very strong one wing, now they've got this perfectionistic thing kicking in. So again, it can be very uncomfortable and driven. So the two with a three wing. Now again, the three is very much the achiever, successful, kind of looks good, all of that sort of energy. So a two with a strong three wing commands attention for self through establishing personal connections. So there is more of that sort of networking going on in their lives. Enjoys making others feel better and is generally very skilled at this. Develop personal talents to attract. So again, the three is very accomplished. They have fine-tuned a lot of their skills, and so now the two will pick up on that. And so they'll be presenting themselves very well to attract, of course, to get that love. Humorous, and can be a little more direct about their desires. But they can also be seductive. So we know that the three likes to look good, seem good, all of that. And so again, I knew it too, who, she had that flip switch. She would flip that switch and all of a sudden it was like, who is this person, you know? And it was this very seductive energy. And they do that, again, for personal gain. They don't necessarily question their own motives. And so they're more extroverted, even than your mainstream two, but more image-oriented, more self-promoting, and a little more ambitious than the two with a one wing. Okay, any questions about any of that?
You have, after a two, you have both one and the three, or is one identifying more with one side than the other, and you have a blend of them?
Yeah, so you probably have both. I feel like I have a very strong 9 wing, but I also have a very strong 2 wing. And it just depends on the circumstances where the situation I'm in or what I'm trying to achieve. I will either, like I've said about on my day off, I'm really into the 9 wing because I just don't want to do anything, and I don't want to be dealing with this one-ish energy of do and perfection. But if I'm in a pastoral situation, then I'm really drawing on my 2 qualities, because all of those interpersonal relationship qualities are needed. So it depends on how you have developed them, how much maybe awareness you have, or of course it's influenced by, we've talked about this, about the job that you have. You may be in a job where you're a 2, but if you're a salesperson, you need to be a 3. And so you may develop that 3 wing way more than the 1 wing. So, it's like columns, those like percentages. They're fluid, they move up and down. But your home plate is the 2. Oh. Oh. Okay. So you can't really see this, and I don't want to go switching thing. But one of my favorite cartoons is this one of a 2 talking with another person. So the 2 is here, and she says to the other person, "You're fine, how am I?" And I thought, wow, that really captures the 2. They're out of touch, and they'll tell you how you are.
From a 9.
Thank you. Okay.
But if I understand right, the 2 wouldn't actually say the second half of that phrase, right? You'd say, I am fine, but then you're kind of not aware of, oh, I need to tell me
Yeah.
how I am.
Yeah, there is that. But there's just something about that whole little scenario it's like really kind of gives you a flavor of the 2. Yeah. All right. So now we go to what is called, again, they're calling it the lines, which is the other 2 positions other than your wings. These are the 2 positions that you should also have a connection to, or a sense of the energy of these other 2. And then when you think about that, so there's your own number, there are the 2 wings, so that's 3, and now you have the number you go to when you're in crisis and the number that you go to when you're really in a good place. So there's 5 numbers right off the bat that you have a strong identification with. So when the 2 is really in a good place in their life, they will go towards the 4, who is very much the person who's into their feelings, who has the sense of deep, deep feelings and of their own uniqueness and specialness. So this, of course, is the perfect place for the 2 to go, because they need to be in touch with who they really are. And when they do that, they start to accommodate other people's needs less. So you may have had a 2 in your life who was a very strong 2, and then all of a sudden they weren't kind of looking out for you anymore, or they weren't, making your cup of tea or running with the paper when you knocked it over. Of course, if they were really a good 2, they would have made me another cup of tea, but that's... and there's the one's perfect criticism of the scenario. See, that was the one thing that should have happened but didn't happen. But thank you anyway. They become open to their own inner experience and practical self-care, because the 4s are all about self-care and looking after their needs and their feelings and giving them space and air. Accepts a long avoided sense of loneliness or unworthiness. And so the 2 for health then starts to deal with the fact that they didn't feel loved or they didn't feel protected, and will start to acknowledge some of the sadness around that, some of the loneliness that they still feel, perhaps even though they're in all of these relationships, they just don't feel that they're still getting the love that they want. Even though everybody else is great, everybody thinks the person's wonderful, but they may not be feeling so wonderful. And so they start to allow for that energy to come up and be acknowledged. They learn to say no. And that's a real hard thing for a 2. I mean, I'm sure those words just like stick at the back of their throat. It's like to actually say no just feels so wrong. And again, shame then comes up. It's like I'm not fulfilling other people's needs. And so like anything, it's like a practice. You have to do it a few times and live with the uncomfortableness and then process all of the reactive feelings that come up until you get used to doing it, and then after a while you'll be able to say no, fine, because you recognize that, hey, I have equal needs here, equal feelings, mine count too. Another unfortunate sort of image maybe for a 2 can be a doormat. You've got to wake up to the reality that you're a doormat, and you got to stop being a doormat. You got to look after yourself. So the 2 then begins to tap into and expresses the creative, artistic energies more like a 4. Downside of this is individualism to avoid personally needing others. So they can become so focused on that then that it's like you're going in the opposite direction, and now you're not needing others anymore. So you don't want to do that, obviously. So then when you go to the stress point, when you're in the real time of crisis, the 2 would go to the number 8, which is, again, the 8 is the power character in the Enneagram. And so what happens here then is that there's again a flip from extreme neediness to more of that outward expression of power of dominating others. Love withdrawn becomes silent, withdrawn, or furious. So here I talked about that earlier, that they go from kind of being a teddy bear to being a grizzly bear. And suddenly the fangs really are out, and they can, because again, they don't have the experience of how to nicely express what your needs are or what you're feeling. So it's often like it's like a sudden change into 5th gear, and it just all comes out because they don't have the ability to modulate so much because it's a new experience. It's just a very strong energy, and you have to learn again how to share without wiping the other person off the face of the earth. And then the love overgiven becomes demanding, maybe hysterical. So it moves into that, you owe me love. I'm demanding that you do this for me. So it becomes again that more powerful grabbing at rather than just allowing. And attempts to control and bully by taking charge. And again, I've seen situations where twos can do this. It's like from being the more passive in the background trying to manipulate, just they come right out and just lay down the law all of a sudden. And this is what I want and this is the way it's going to be. Which again, of course, is quite a surprise for the people that live with them. The upside for going to the 8 energy, assertive energy allows to directly self-advocate. So there's the good thing. When you are in touch with your needs, when you're in touch with your feelings, now you can be your own advocate. You don't need to be the doormat anymore. You can stand up for yourself. But you do it in a way that's respectful and is nice and not overcharged energetically. Any comments on that about the 2 other lines?
Down at the bottom of what you just showed, it said something about being distrustful of others and maybe isolated. It's probably the downside of
Being distrustful of others and may isolate the self. I missed that one. Becomes distrustful of others.
It's interesting that happens. Yeah.
I have seen where when they are in the shame mode, that they suddenly will disappear. Like you won't see them around because obviously they don't want to come out into the open when they're in that feeling shameful about the revelations that they have made. Yeah, and of course the 8's way of dealing with others is really not to trust them, but to dominate.
Interesting.
So I can see how that would be true. So who have we here who is a 2? Okay, we have quite a few. Can anybody speak to that particular point about becomes distrustful of others and may isolate the self?
Yes.
Hang on. Sure. Catherine.
I thought I was a 1, but I'm a 2. I'm definitely a 2 with a strong 1.
So what was the
Manifest.
differentiation point for you? Was there something that helped you clarify?
Oh, just my whole life. And it's only recently that I've gotten into more the critical and perfectionist, But I wasn't most of my adult life. But I'm thinking really strongly of very close family relationships where I just have felt like I was the doormat. Of course, I didn't realize I made myself the doormat willingly. And I just don't trust, I just feel like I'm being manipulated by friends and family, and I'll just cut off ties for a while. Because I'm afraid of what I'll say, or, I fear them taking advantage of me.
And you're afraid of your own power response then? Like if you go into a very powerful place that you just come out.
Well, I've been hysterical in my life.
It's okay.
I admit it.
Well, we all have. Yeah, so if you suddenly feel like all of these people have just been using you, then that makes sense that you would say, hey, does this person really respect me and need me and they're asking my help, or are they just using me? And I can see how that's a very good distinction to make for oneself. Discernment. Am I just being the doormat again, and are they going back to a familiar pattern, or is this a genuine situation that they're looking for help and I can give it and it'll be good for me and them? Anybody else? Nancy.
Okay, so I think the thing that's really upsetting me right this minute is that I'm looking at whether my helpfulness to others has been about me or about them, because I can remember starting as a child, I was always helpful and doing all that. And my heroes are St. Francis and, people who gave everything to other, my work with the homeless. So I think if I would call myself distrustful and isolating now is because I'm trying to figure it out. I'm trying to say, okay, which was my real motivation? And I don't want anybody else to tell me, because people are very like, oh no, it was so nice what you did. I'm like, no, wait a minute. I want to isolate and ask myself, go inside and find out what my own motivation, because there's a lot of negativity in that too stuff that I wasn't considering. So
Right.
I feel a little bit like I'm backing off, and same with family, because I feel not that they've ever been, I've never been a doormat, but I just am not seen when my brother and sister are, because they just speak right up, and I'm always like waiting until I can get a turn.
Right.
So it's an interesting time,
Wonderful.
yeah.
So, and this is really great. Thank you for sharing this, because what the Enneagram is all about is waking up.
Yeah.
And it's waking up to, this is how I have perceived this. And then, well, was that the reality? Or was
Yeah.
it just my perception?
Mhm.
And then, this is how I responded to that perception. And was it necessary? And can I change my reaction or my response?
Mhm.
So it sounds like you're really sorting this, but at the same time, just as you began to speak, was there a lot of emotion there?
Sure, yeah.
Right. And what is the emotion that's coming up for you in recognizing all this or having laid out there?
It's a combination of sort of sadness, maybe a little bit of shame, and the distrust. I've always been a really trusting person, and now I'm sort of going, wait a minute, what's really going on? So, and what Claire said, because my parents were completely there, my mom especially, completely nourishing, but still as a child, I never quite felt seen for my authentic self,
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering whether they saw me, but I didn't feel like they saw me. I'll ask my dad when I see him. But I really identified with
Mhm.
the idea of being a two child. So
And maybe it's possible that they saw you, but they weren't able to respond.
yeah,
My dad, at the end of his life, when he went to hospital and he was told basically that, they could operate but he would die. And he said, okay, have the operation. So he had about 5 days.
Mhm.
And my sister went to see him. And in the conversation that he had with her, it was all about, he knew he hadn't been a good dad. It was very interesting that nobody had to tell him, like he knew every single way, and he just talked about all of that. But he said, I just couldn't be what you wanted me to be, and I guess what he wanted to be, but he just couldn't do it. So sometimes I think even people can see you, but again, it doesn't mean that they have the ability to respond either. Thanks, Nancy. So hang on, was there someone else's hand up? Another 2. All the way back. Sandy.
So last week I thought I was a 1 with a strong 2. This week I think I'm a 2 with a strong 1. So I don't really know, to tell you the truth. But the 2, the aspect of the 2 in terms of trust, I think I'm just not trusting myself. I'm not trusting myself to know my own motivation. I'm kind of automatic pilot, oh, this person needs this, okay, I can do that. And my girlfriend this weekend, we went to the film fest, she came down to visit, and all weekend long she kept saying, Sandy, I'm teaching you how to say no. So that was a clue. We're talking about 2, so that's where I wonder if I'm more of a 2 than a 1, but I have a strong 1. So it's still confusing for me, but the 2 is really speaking to me, especially in some of the characteristics where, well, why am I saying yes to that when I really mean no? And so it's really good for me to be thinking about that or becoming aware of that. So anyway, I'm still confused, but I'm okay with that.
And so do you remember remember in that the Enneagram Made Easy, it says, can you remember how you would went through this at 25? Is there a sense at all of, as a child, as a teenager, you were one or the other, or?
Both. I can remember both. My dad used to say I was a bleeding heart. That's the two, right? That's the two.
Yeah.
My mother was always self-sacrificing. I learned it from her. Always give before, you always serve everyone else before yourself. So that was a lesson. But I was also the first of everything, the first grandchild, the first daughter, the first everybody. So there was a lot of responsibility in my life and a lot of being told, you need to take care of. Please take care of your brother. Watch out for your sister. Watch out for your cousins. You're the oldest. So I had both of those. So that's why I feel I could be 1 to a 2 or a 2 to a 1. I think in my life, in my business, in my career, when I'm functioning in those kind of roles, I feel very much a 1. But as a chaplain or here at Unity, I feel very much a 2. So I'm confused.
Well, and that's okay,
It's fine. I know it's really
Yeah.
because next week I'll be a 3 with a strong 2.
Then we will have to no. See, what if you are balanced? What if you're healthy? You've done a lot of internal work and growth. Then does it really matter whether you're a 1 with a very strong 2 wing or a 2 with a very strong 1 wing? The important thing is to look at them and say, oh, well, these are the 2 drawers that I take my clothing out of and put on in the morning. And depending on circumstances, yes, it would be nice if you can figure out the motivation, and we will get into that. There's a way of differentiating, because like you're saying, there are certain numbers that people get confused on. Am I this with that, or am I that with this? And we'll get into that. But I would say celebrate who you are on the 1 and on the 2, and see oh, I have all these good characteristics, and I have these other tendencies that could get me into trouble. I could maybe become a doormat, or I could become hypercritical. So, Julie.
Well, I'm such a 2 with a strong 1 wing, and anybody here who knows me knows exactly, and you had me pinned from the moment you knew me. But in regards to the distrust of others and withdrawing of self, and of course through this whole thing I'm laughing at every single bullet. I'm hysterically laughing, trying to keep the tears from coming down my face because I'm laughing so hard because I identify with so much of it. But what really occurred to me is last year I saw a t-shirt, or maybe it was a bumper sticker, and it said, it's been happening in our home. I used to like people, but then people ruined it. So that's kind of been this thing that's been happening. And it's like, oh, I used to like people, and then people ruined it. I mean, that's such a number 2 bumper sticker. It's a t-shirt too, for anybody who wants it. I know where to get it.
Yeah, you can all develop your own bumper stickers and whole business. Ask the trees, they'll tell you, and the aids. There was another 2 back here.
So I so relate. And I had a situation over Christmas where my family came to visit. I'm new to this area, and it was the first time they came to visit me. And I did an amazing job to make sure that they were all going to be okay. And I've also gotten myself to a place where I do set boundaries. And I'm glad about that, but I do go to the 8 and I get really, really angry. How could you not think that I have done enough? So the hoops were not high enough. It wasn't enough. And they let me know. So, exactly. And so they were appalled. They're so used to me being this 2. And I was crushed. So then I do not trust, because I feel that they don't have my heart in their best interest. But it's really an interesting, slippery slope when you start to point a finger and say, how could you? When I know that a lot of what I did was to show them how wonderful I am and how I'm going to take care of them.
Thank you. I hope you all got that. That's the crux. It's like, well, how dare you? How could you do this after all I've done? Yes, but after all I've done was for me to look good in your eyes. But it was a great insight. But then, it's like the pendulum. When you go from being the 2 to being the 8, okay, you've gone all the way over there. So is there a way that I can maybe just come back to the middle and trust that I can say what I need to say and be prepared that, this isn't who we thought you were or whatever, So, yeah, it might not be pretty the first time. Thank you.
I relate a lot to that, going to 8, but what happens when the 2 goes to 8, they're not feeling their own needs. And so the fury comes from being angry at someone for not fulfilling them, but they haven't expressed what their needs are. So that person that's in a relationship with them doesn't know where that's coming from. And if the 2 would just learn to be able to express it in those words, rather than going immediately to the 8 and thinking they need to express it in that aggressive and very energetic way. And it's interesting. The other day I had an insight where I was talking to somebody and I said, "Gosh, you don't look at the world through who you can help." And it was amazing to me that, all of the 9 types, we all have our lens into the world. And the 2's lens into the world is kind of